Welcome to the Collecting Keys Real Estate Investing Podcast with your host, Mike DeHaan and Dan Austin. From wins, losses, horror stories, and tactics for optimizing your business, Mike and Dan take a real, uncensored deep dive into the ins and outs of running a full-time real estate investment and wholesaling business.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 3 of what was the No BS Real Estate Investing Show. But after some research about other podcasts with similar names, we decided to change it up a little bit. So this is now the Collecting Keys Real Estate Investing Podcast. And that name kind of comes from Dan a little while back as we started buying rentals and, sort of like looking at what exactly we were doing. We were collecting properties almost like you would baseball cards. And you essentially end up with, a whole bunch of keys. So if you were looking at building a rental portfolio, that's what you're doing. You are building a collection of these rental portfolios and hence collecting keys. So here we are. How you doing, Dan?
Good. Yeah. And I think the funny part about that is twofold. There was a lot of BS podcasts out there, but this is not one of them.
Yeah, that's true.
Collecting keys. My daughter was in here this morning and I've thrown a lot of keys away, but you do collect keys. Some are useless. And my daughter was asking, what's this key for, Dad? And I'm like, I have no idea.
I know. And you're even organized, dude. My little, I don't even necessarily like a key drawer. My junk drawer is just full of keys. Yeah. And like, there's so many of them. Like I have several properties that I rent that have had the same tenant for 3 years now. And there's a couple of them have gone vacant over like the past summer and I've swapped out tenants and, I'll have to go over there and I'm like, shit, like how am I even going to get into this property? Like, I don't even know where the keys are. Or like, I have like garage door openers and I don't know what house they're for. I have no idea.
But you're definitely afraid to throw them away because you're like, I might need these. But in reality, you're like, I have no idea what to use this for.
Yeah, exactly. So I just have a bunch of miscellaneous keys. It's when I actually found a couple garage door openers not too long ago. And I just I have a couple houses that are really close to each other. And I went and I drove by them and I just clicked the garage door openers really quick. I don't know if the tenants are home or not, just because I was trying to figure out which ones are one. And they're probably sitting in there like, what the hell? Did their garage door just open? It's like, yeah, don't worry about it. Trying to drive by. But anyway, I guess that's an okay problem to have enough stuff. But you've worked with me long enough to know that I'm such a disorganized person when it comes to all of that and like all of our paperwork and everything that I don't know. I think this is why you want to get to that scale where you can just outsource that to somebody and just have it be like, here's all our closing statements and all of our receipts and whatever. Please just take care of this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where I spent a lot of my evenings this weekend or this week working with our bookkeepers because it's just like it just turns into a shit show so fast, right? Yeah. It's like I have all these things and I'm like, okay, this is all wrong. We got to fix it. Right? Yeah. Got to have somebody else doing that for us all the time.
What's so silly about that? I mean, I feel like anybody this is like the unspoken problem of like a real estate investment business. And it's hilarious because you look at the different groups that we're involved with, whether that's, CCF, Ryan's group, or like GoBundance or whatever. People are always looking for like accountants or bookkeepers that know real estate. Cause like, a lot of them out there, it's funny. I feel like they don't even necessarily know how complicated it is. Cause like, we've gone through 3 or 4 now where they're like, oh, do you know how to do bookkeeping for a real estate investment company? They're like, yeah, totally. And then you get them into your books and they just screw everything up, and it's like, if you didn't know, don't say that you did. Like, it's not something that just it's not like selling widgets on an e-commerce store where it's like you have a transaction, there's like the depreciation, there's the interest and the principal separation on your rental properties. There's so many different things that go into it. And I don't know, they just try to fake it. And then they send you a bill for $1,000, even though they just screwed it all up.
Are you bitter? Are you bitter?
I feel like this is what's going to become is just me being bitter about some arbitrary thing.
Yeah.
But
well, I get it. Cause even this week, right? Like we have $121,000 transaction on our books from a cash out refinance. Right. And she's like, what is this? And I'm like, oh, it's a cash out refinance. She's like, oh, is it revenue? I'm like, no, it's not revenue. Like
it's debt.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And so it's just like, how do I account for it? I'm like, I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
paying you to find that out.
I know, I know. And even on my stuff, they're sending me all these like random questions about, well, I realized I was going through my books and I noticed that all of my interest that was being paid down was being accounted for in one property. And
Oh,
I was like, where the hell is the reductions on the other properties? And she was like, oh, I didn't realize there were other payments. And I was like, what did you think these deductions
oh
were on
man.
here? I was like, it's not that complicated. Especially because I even made a point of trying to be organized. I put in
Yeah.
all the statements for last year in like one point, and then I don't know. They just people,
It's
man.
unfortunate. I mean, it's one of those things where like bookkeeping is still considered probably like a low skill thing, but it is
Yeah,
a lot of work. So
yeah,
the pay's not there. I mean, we do pay kind of a lot for bookkeeping,
yeah.
but even so, for what you need, it's like we're not paying them people enough to want to learn how to do it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Well, I feel like that's that challenge can be found in a lot of roles for like a mid-sized business. I mean, I don't know. Are we like a small business or a mid-sized business? What's that based off of? Based off
I
of
think we're
revenue?
small,
Are
but
we small? I mean, we don't have a lot of staff, but I mean, if you look at like our revenue by staff, it's pretty
yeah,
decent.
yeah,
But I mean, we're not making $10 million a year off
yeah,
that, but at the same time, our overhead's so low.
yeah,
But I mean, like because if you get big enough, you can hire somebody full time to do that at cost, and it
yeah.
kind of just makes sense because they learn your system.
Mhm.
Whether that's a bookkeeper or an admin or an in-house property manager, those tasks that are kind of like the assistance tasks. If you're small or you're even like mid-sized and you probably don't have enough revenue to make sense to hire that person full time, so you outsource to someone else, but then they don't care because they're not actually indebted to your
Mhm.
system, but it's also like expensive to pay those people. So it almost
Yeah.
makes no sense. You kind of get stuck in this cycle of like, I have to basically commit to making less money and having more headaches, or I have to, you know, and having more, I have to commit to making more money, but having more headaches by not having those people. Or I can have less money and slightly less headaches by having that person. And there isn't really like a win situation to that,
Yeah. I have
you
an
know?
idea. I'm thinking here. So remember how, I don't know, 3, 4 months ago we were talking about buying our Tesla houses?
Yeah.
Maybe we need to put that on the back
Um,
burner and buy our bookkeeper house.
I mean, it might be a bad idea. What do you mean by a Tesla house? Explain that
Yeah.
to somebody.
So as any good investor knows, right? You gotta buy an asset to pay for your liability.
Exactly.
And I'm still torn between buying my Tesla Plaid mode or a Ferrari or something of those likes. The only edge the
Humble
Tesla
brag over
has,
here.
yeah, the only advantage that Tesla has is autopilot, so I can still make money while I'm driving. Where I feel like the Ferrari needs like full attention, right?
It definitely
Um,
does.
but
And
anyhow, point being, right, we're trying to buy some assets. If we want something that is just kind of like, I just want it. There's no reason to need it, but a
yeah,
Tesla Plaid mode is pretty badass, right? So why don't we just buy something that pays for it?
yeah. Well,
So
exactly. And I mean, that is kind of the benefit of buying assets is you can get into a position of, okay, well, I'm gonna buy this property that's gonna give me X amount per cash flow, and then if you want to buy the Tesla, the Model S, the Plaid, I think it's 140 grand. You can buy that right now with what $7,000, $8,000 down. The payment's like $1,800 a month, I think, when I was looking the other day. So it's like, say you get, for us, that's what, two properties, I guess, which our typical cash flow property is like $900 a month. Get a
yeah,
couple and you're willing to, if you have enough to cover all the rest of your stuff and you want that just to be for toys, you can get into a pretty sweet car without having to spend a lot of money if you have the assets to cover it.
yeah,
Um, but
yeah, which is actually a fun conversation to have. Like for any new investors listening, is like the exercise that you did, and then in turn showed me, which is like calculate the monthly expense of like your
mm-hmm.
ideal life.
Yep.
Just add it up. What do you need? You need to maybe a house payment. I don't know, whatever your living situation is. Maybe you want a Tesla Plaid mode. It's $1,800. You need a cell phone. You need medical insurance, whatever all that is, and add it up, and then just start working towards that number. Because it's
Yeah.
surprisingly not that hard once you know that number and you start buying cash flowing assets or getting that that passive income from whatever source, it's not that hard once you start stacking it to get to that number. You just have to know what that number is and then work towards it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's especially if you're doing, the transactions like we are with like wholesaling or flipping where you can make larger chunks of money. I mean, because I did that at the mastermind with Ryan last year. And, I'm a relatively simple person. I think my number was like $14,000 or $15,000 a month, which is a decent chunk of money for somebody with a salary. But when you're doing, wholesale deals and flip deals on the regular, that's like one deal a month. Even with us as 50-50 owners, that's like one or two deals.
Yeah.
And it's not even counting our rental income, and that's my number to cover my mortgage, the general my expense I have on food, all the luxuries I tend to enjoy, plus some splurges on there. I had like, a vacation property. I had a nicer car, all that sort of stuff. And it just comes down to being strategic, and somebody is getting started, or you have a couple properties you want to scale. That is like I said, it's kind of a fun exercise just to sort of, realize how doable that is. I think the only challenge that comes to that, when I went to that mastermind, there was one group, there were a couple, our friends down in Knoxville that we flipped that property with, actually, their number was like 500 grand a month.
Oh shit.
and it's like, that's a little more significant, but even then, we were able to break it down and be like, all right, so if you actually want to do that, this is how many transactions per month plus what, your cash flow would have to look like. Mm-hmm. And it's all measurable and you can just sort of build to that. I know. And then I found that long-term, what that did is it made me, I guess, like more motivated to like strive for more and not necessarily like settle for what I thought was possible, because you realize how doable that is and be like, well, like dream life, like what could that actually look like?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think a lot of too in the investor world, and especially in the real estate world, like frugality is like praised. It's like a super good thing. And a lot of real estate investors are frugal because they're like, well, if I reduce my expenses, then my cash flow from my real estate can cover my lifestyle and I can be an entrepreneur or not have to work for a W-2. And I think you and I have both committed to like, well, I don't want to live frugally. I want to live good and I want to have a good time. Doesn't mean that we're not smart with our money, but it like you have to set your goals higher, right? Then,
totally.
I'm just covering my bare minimum expenses and I'll have food on the plate. It's like, no, I want steak on my plate.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, and I think it's different personalities too, because there's a lot of people that are happy with like the frugal lifestyle, which is totally fine. Going back to, I don't know if you ever were into like the old school sort of fire, like Mr. Money Mustache and those sort of folks, but like they're literally like, save as much of your money as you can and like find like your basic minimum number, and then you can fire or, get financial independence or retire early. And then you can focus on stuff that you do like. And like, some people just do that as like to live a really more, I don't know, like a simpler life because they hate working. Some people use that to like try and build businesses and that sort of stuff. And, I think for us, it sort of came down to, all right, it frees up your time to go and make more revenue once your monthly net is paid for. And, if you are willing and able to use your newfound time to do that, it's an extremely powerful position to be in. And it's shocking how when you are fully committed and things aren't like a side hustle anymore, how easy it is to honestly make like good money.
Mm-hmm. But $100,000 a year as a real estate investor or an entrepreneur in anything really. I mean, I guess unless you pick a really bad business, but it's not hard to hit $100,000 a year.
No.
But in corporate America, that's actually like you still don't, unless you're in like, maybe Silicon Valley or the tech industry, like quite a few industries, like $100,000 still is not your starting salary.
Yeah. And there's the trade-off being, obviously in a corporate environment, it's going to be guaranteed. And for ours, it's not. I mean, we've had months. Yeah, that's true. We've had months where we've made nothing. And then we have a month where, we each make 60, 70 grand. And that works out pretty well, but it all balances out. And then, we've had months too, where it's like, well, we got to pay money ourselves into the business for payroll because things just went a little sideways this month or stuff got delayed or whatever. But, it's the trade-off. And after a while, it's fun. I've realized over the last, honestly, just like couple of months, how my mindset has shifted. with the, how the business is growing, we've gotten the systems and things optimized, that like stuff like that doesn't really stress me out anymore, or like missed opportunities or whatever, because I know we're going to have more.
Yeah.
Like our marketing is just so regular and so consistent that it's like, oh, we dropped the ball on that one. It's all right. We got, 17 more in the hopper. Like some of those will come together and we'll figure it out. And now it's more like, how can we optimize and like really like be more efficient, as opposed to, God, I hope we can make something this month.
Yeah. Well, and having that abundance mindset, right, that you're talking about,
Yeah.
is like, there's going to be more opportunity, and that you've learned how to create opportunity, most importantly. And then you build like a little bit of confidence when you learn how to create opportunity. The more opportunity you create, the more confidence you have. And it's like a loop, right? It just keeps going. And I think the fun like thing to look back on and reflect on, like as a entrepreneur in this space anyways, is we collect a salary now from our business, right? That's just in our overheads. And that's pretty cool. Like as opposed to like, we've got a big win, we're paying ourselves out. It's like, no, every month we're paying ourselves, and then we're going to pay ourselves again when we have, money to do so, which is more frequently than not.
Yeah, totally. I mean, small salary, for tax reasons, but it's still nice to have. It pays my mortgage, so I can't complain.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely something that, you just it goes back to that mind shift you're talking about too, right? Is like before, especially when we first started, we're like, what are we going to pay ourselves for? Like, we're going to make sure we make payroll, or that we have enough money for marketing, which is kind of the wrong mindset to be in. And we knew in our head, like, oh, the pay yourself first model, but we still weren't able to practice it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like it's kind of harder to do when you're not from that standpoint of having that financial independence, though, because you want to invest everything.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we were doing.
Yeah. But at the same time, the risk of that is, like we talked about way back when we first started shifting towards paying ourselves, you don't want to be the people that start a business and you keep doing more and more and more and more, and then things go south for XYZ reason, and you're walking away with nothing because you just poured everything back into the business.
Sure. Yep.
Like I think that's why it's important to take some chips off the table whenever you can, because in worst case scenario, your business goes bust, real estate goes whatever. It's like, well, at least you put some money in your personal savings. It's still there. At least you collected something from it. You didn't just waste years of your life and endless amounts of stress and headache for nothing.
Yeah.
But
talking about payroll, we just added some additional payroll, I think, today. Did we agree to that? I mean, is that what we're doing?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, as far as he's concerned, I mean, I'm talking from the rundown.
He thinks he's working for us now
today. Yeah. So Judd, if you're listening, here's your official job offer on our podcast. If you listen to it, you said you would. So if you don't bring this up on Monday, I'm going to assume that you didn't listen and you're officially fired. So, so it'll be interesting. And it's funny, as I've been working on our systems for his role. So Judd's going to be coming on as our transaction coordinator / dispositions manager. So he's going to be facilitating deals getting done after our acquisitions manager gets contracts signed. Whether that means he's assigning contracts to, other buyers for us to wholesale, he's assisting us closing for a rental or for a flip. He's helping sellers move out of properties or find where they're going to go, or helping with their paperwork, whatever they need to do. Stuff that we're all kind of like, you, me, and James, and everyone's kind of doing sort of just sporadically right now. He's going to be taking that solely on. And it's funny because when we're kind of doing it, it seems like it's pretty basic. But as I've been going into getting all of the documentation for him to get started, I've realized there's like a lot of stuff that's involved, because I've approached it with the thought of like, well, if I was explaining this to somebody that, like a child or somebody that knew nothing, what would they need to know? And there is a lot that we just like assume, right? And that is just natural because we've been doing this for a while. And you realize how complex the actual sales process is after you have the contract signed, because just like sellers aren't predictable, buyers, especially on a wholesale deal, are not predictable either. Like we had some friends of ours who are also our main competitors in town. Cody, I'm going to put you on blast for this deal right now, if you ever listen to this. They posted this deal on Facebook that was like the worst property. Like this place was so beat to hell. I saw the photos and I was like, oh my God, like something that honestly we wouldn't even touch because it's just so much work for a price that I was like, that's like a really expensive price for that property with not a lot of upside. And I kind of like, I texted him and kind of like teased him. I was like, good luck with that. And he's like, oh, bro, I sold that in 15 minutes. And I was like, what? Like how? It was like 155 for this house that needs a 100% everything remodel. It's like a 2-bed, 1-bath, 800 square feet. Comps are like 230 ish, 240. So, there's probably like a $90,000 total spread, but the house needs $60,000, $70,000 worth of work. And I'm like, who the hell buys that? I don't understand. But then, we've had ones that have like these huge spreads, but they're like kind of like a higher price point, or they're like, I don't know, they're just like kind of more, I don't want to say like unique properties. They're just like not like cheap, and people don't want them.
Yeah, it's really like the idea of why people buy penny stocks, because they're like, well, it's just so cheap, but it's like the ROI still is the same as if it wasn't a penny stock, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Cody, I'm good for you. Am I jealous? Yes. Screw you. This is a good deal. I'm glad you made money, but still, like he even said yesterday, texted me back. He's like, bro, it's like, I don't know. We didn't want that deal. It's like, I don't know how, like what buyers are thinking most of the time. And it's just a fascinating thing. But like point being though, with the disposition side of it, there's a whole process of being able to find that person and market it and, determining what a good price is for that. Because he told me too. He's like, it's like I sold it so fast, like I probably priced that too low. I was like, honestly, you probably did. Probably could have gotten another $5,000 or maybe $10,000 out of that somehow. But so I think having someone fully committed to that will be really interesting, and it'll be I'll be curious to know like how that's able to improve in our business with somebody 100% fully like developing that a little bit. Because right now, we kind of like throw spaghetti against the wall and stuff just been able to come together because there's so many hungry buyers. But as we've gotten into the holidays, it has been harder to move properties, I think, because people are just not as interested in buying. But
yeah, and I apologize. It's pouring down right at my house, and my neighbor's mowing his lawn.
We can't hear it.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
so sorry if you can't. It is weird, right? Like we talked about this, I don't know, a week or two ago, is like the different things that buyers put in their heads of why they're not going to buy, seasonal or whatever. But I don't know. Personally, I'm still bullish even through the winter in the markets we're in. I don't see it going down, which is like a whole nother conversation maybe to have about like inflation and how that's going to affect the industry. I know a lot of people are talking about it, but I mean, it's probably continues to be a good time to buy because knowing inflation's going up, house prices probably aren't going to go down.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know you bring that up because we both listened to this podcast today. It's called the podcast called Capital Hacking. Do you remember the name of the guy? I should have wrote that down.
I don't know. He's a GoBro. I don't.
Yeah,
he's his name. Hit him up.
He's a GoBundance guy. I'm gonna look it up really quick, so I don't want to like forget him. Yeah, it was with Jason Hartman was the guy they interviewed on the Capital Hacking podcast with Josh McCallan and Eric Cabral. But he's like an economist that works with Ken McElroy. Ken McElroy is a very big wig. He must be close to a billionaire multifamily investor.
I don't know his net worth, but he's definitely a top guy in the multifamily space.
Yeah, and just like economics in general. And he was talking about, the whole inflation picture and how a lot of people are viewing it completely incorrectly because they're basically looking at inflation or like looking at like housing and things like that they consider to be bubbles, and they're considering like housing for a bubble because it's gone up in prices or whatever. But he's saying that where people are mistaken is they view it as a bubble because they're comparing it to the US dollar, because in their mind the US dollar is stagnant. But the problem is, the US dollar is decreasing in value. So the fact that houses are increasing and the US dollar is going down kind of means they're staying the same, which a lot of people kind of understand that. But the key he was saying is if you look at the prices of property versus the average like consumer price index for a lot of things, houses are actually kind of right on par with everything else, which is actually pretty frightening if you think about it, because that means every single person that doesn't own real assets, their wealth is decreasing at an incredibly shocking rate, and he basically like the main takeaway I took from it is I was like, why the hell are we wholesaling or flipping anything? Like, honestly, we should just take all of our money and just park it in hard assets, whether that, real estate, Bitcoin, I guess I'm an ether guy. I don't like Bitcoin. Gold, like whatever, something that's going to be not necessarily tied to the dollar, but tied to a consumer price index a little bit more.
Yeah. Hard
And
assets.
yeah, a hard asset.
Inflation
Like,
protected assets.
yeah, or honestly, like at this point, even securities, even though I know the
Sure.
stock market can go up and down, everyone that has significant money, no one wants to be in cash. So they're going to be pumping it into securities if they're not real estate people.
Yeah.
And
Agreed. And then I think the argument too on the Capital Hacking podcast was that the real estate's such a great tool for it because you said park all of our money. Well, let's park all of everybody else's money too, right? And using the advantages of inflationary periods to break down your debt, to reduce your debt, because if your debt's fixed, the fixed amount of debt, but your house keeps going up in price and your rent keeps going up in price, that debt becomes such a minor number. That's where you talk about people buying houses if they cash flow $1, right? Because over a period of time, the house appreciates and the rent's going to keep going up. So that $1 of cash flow in 3 years might actually be $500 in cash flow.
Yep.
And you have $200,000 of equity.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he kind of, I wish I had the exact numbers or details if I broke that down, but he talks about, the people that, if you look at inflation since like the 70s, the people that bought properties at like, even at like 7% interest rate in the 70s, and they paid it down over 30 years if they never refinanced it. If you look at the amount that they paid versus inflation and appreciation of the real estate market, they actually like made money every month by renting from themselves. So instead of it, even though they saw, $800 leaving their account or whatever, it was actually the same as if they were depositing $100 into their own account by paying it into their house, in terms of like their net worth. Sure, it's not in cash, but in terms of their net worth, because of how different that 7% interest was, how much lower that was than the effect of inflation and the appreciation on the actual value of the asset. And, looking at what rates are now, it's that number is just going to be exponentially greater in the future. And, I think that's why a lot of people, I'm doing this right now as well, are just basically max leveraging everything at super low interest rates, because you can go and you can get this cash, sure, it's tied to a debt, but if that debt's being paid for, it's a covered asset by a renter, then you can get a huge amount of money, basically, tax free if it's a cash out refi. And you can use that to buy other assets and outpace inflation pretty easily right now without having to, pay taxes or deal with that whole situation. But I don't know, like it's funny that podcast was, it was like slightly alarming, mainly because I'd never heard it from like that perspective before. The main things I've heard about inflation are people that are either super political one way or the other, or they just don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Right.
But they hear somebody that's like, to break it down that thoroughly, it's kind of like, okay, like why would we ever sell anything? Especially because we have the ability to buy stuff. I mean, even the stuff we have down in Knoxville right now, we can buy some of those properties and we can be into them, for like $5,000 to $7,000 down because the property is so cheap. It's like, why the hell wouldn't we do that? Yeah. That's like our earnest money on properties here.
Yeah, and even if it's not a known as an appreciation market over a period of time, I mean, it still will go up in value, especially if inflation is impacting it. But it's that debt pay down piece too, right? That we're fixing it, we're locking it in at a fixed amount of debt over a period of time, right? And as inflation goes up, that debt stays the same and gets smaller, paid by the renters. Right?
Yeah. Well, and even if it doesn't, appreciate that much, the cash flow potential over there, because rents are like surprisingly universal across a lot of the United States, even though property values vary a lot. So as we have one in contract over in Knoxville right now that we've been looking at wholesaling, and haven't had a whole lot of nibbles on it. Probably should have been a little bit greedy with our wholesale fee, if I'm being honest. But it's like a 2-bed, what's a 3-bed, 1-bath, about 900 square feet. Like that property here would be 250 to 260,000 probably, and would probably rent for like 15 to $1,600. The same property over there We have it under contract for $70,000. It needs maybe like $25,000 worth of work. It's not a big house. So we'd be into it for, let's say, 95, and then it should appraise, you'll be able to cash out refi between 140 to 150, but it rents for $1,300 to $1,400, right? So our payment is going to be based on a $150,000 purchase. It can be way less than a $250,000 purchase, but the rent isn't that different. It's like $200 a month, so we'll be able to cash flow 400, so like somewhere between $300 to $500, about $400,000, depending on what we could get for rent, have all of our money out and have, just an asset over there that's just chugging along, and not need to put nearly as much out of pocket to get that deal done like we would over here.
Yep. Yeah. Agreed.
Plus we'd be in a more landlord friendly market. Whereas up here, that your tenants can be killing each other inside the walls of your property and you can't kick them out. Down there, if people are doing bad stuff, you can just get rid of them.
Yeah, when I was talking to that one buyer down there in Knoxville, we were talking about eviction rules and laws. He's like, "Oh no, we just basically drag them out of their house down here." I was like, "Oh, well, that is different than I'm used to dealing with."
And it's not that that's what we ever want to do, but still, up here, we've had so many issues. I mean, when we flipped this little apartment complex up here, and we had a tenant that was a very avid meth user who was regularly bringing home women of the night who he would then give them meth, and they would be sprinting around this complex, knocking on other people's doors, butt naked, screaming for help because he was sexually assaulting them. And the police wouldn't get involved. We couldn't evict this person. We couldn't do anything about this. And this happened over and over and over again. But Washington state law is like, well, we don't want them to be out in the streets, or we don't want them to be in jail. So it's your problem. So what we ended up having to do is paying this guy $5,000 to give him the refrigerator just to get him to go be somebody else's problem, which is
give him the refrigerator. That was the best part.
It straps it on to what was like a little sedan that they pulled up in. Oh, fuck, that's so stupid.
Love it, man.
Yeah. Anyway, well, that was pretty good. That 30 minutes flew by. That was not the conversation I was expecting to have, but I feel like that was a good conversation.
Yeah, but you never know. You just got to go with the flow of the river, Sometimes it just works out that way. Yeah,
I like it. You got a lesson learned or horror story from this past week?
No horror stories. It was actually a pretty smooth week. I would say lesson learned, really talking about, we're hiring our dispositions manager and just reflecting back on that. Me, I'm always kind of like, I want to think about things, right, before I do them. And just trying to do this dispo down in Knoxville this week, which now I know why it was harder, because your price was greedy. I was thinking it was going to be 80. You said now go 90, right? But
so even at 80, people want it at what we have it at.
I know. But anyhow, thinking about that and how much more we need to mature that process, which takes time. Well, we can just buy our time back and have somebody else mature that process for us, and then take it down and then be on that full time, so we can get those $90,000 wholesale, deal or going on, whatever. And so there's just the lesson learned there is like hiring, right? Putting the right people in the right place and letting that system grow beyond you.
Yeah. Doing that, the who, not how, like you sort of hear everywhere. Yeah. I like it.
Exactly.
I don't think I have a good horror story that would be necessarily good for audio. We had one seller this week that was just off the chain with his text messages, but without context, it's not really a good story. But if we could ever write a book out of those text messages, it was incredible. But I think I had a good lesson this week. So we have this Airbnb that we're wrapping up, and in our mastermind group, we have a handful of people that do their short-term rentals. And I went and posted in there and was like, hey, we're getting ready to furnish this thing. Does anybody have any tips? And someone sent us this Excel spreadsheet of basically everything that they buy for all their short-term rentals with prices and links for all of it. And A, thank you so much for sharing that, Brady. And B, I realized how important it is to ask for help, and how I feel like we both had like the most like dude response ever to that, where we were thinking about couches and beds and not shit like towels or like,
sheets.
Duvet covers, and I was like, I guess you do need all that stuff.
Toilet paper.
Yeah, exactly. Things that I hadn't even thought to budget for that, you obviously need in that kind of property. So I guess lesson learned there is, ask other people for guidance when you're doing something new, because Airbnbs are super new for us. And, we would have learned that eventually, but just like by, posting a question in our little Slack community, that saved us. So it would have been probably some really embarrassing first bookings, when we didn't have something super obvious, and B, just like a ton of headache of us having to probably do 50 trips out there. Cause we're like, God damn, we didn't think about dish soap, we're having to do that over and over and over again. So, don't be afraid to ask for help. Even if you feel like you've been doing this for a while. We've done 50 transactions almost now, and we're still just learning stuff all the time. So big lesson learned there.
That's a good lesson, honestly. Asking for help and using it's like the network effect as well.
Mm-hmm.
Using your network.
Yep, 100%. So cool. Well, right on. Thanks, everybody. So we will be the Collecting Keys podcast. This is episode 3 for us. And if you guys wouldn't mind going and subscribing on wherever you listen to your podcasts, leave us a 5-star review. That would be pretty rad. You can follow me at Mike_invest on Instagram. You can follow Dan at InvestormanDan on Instagram. You can also hit us up with a DM on there if you want to say hi. And thanks for listening, everybody. Take it out, Dan.
Yeah, I'll take it out. Why don't you get out there and go collect some keys?
Oh, look at that. Cheesy as they come. We'll work on that. That's terrible.
Yeah. Oh, man.
All right. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Thanks for listening. Please leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And check us out at collectingkeyspodcast.com for tips and guides on starting your own real estate investment and wholesaling business.